Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. Let's get into Torus. I want to know everything that you're working on and how it all came about. Because,
Yeah.
We've known each other for a while here. You were at Pluralsight with Sconner, took that company public.
Yeah.
Massive, massive, massive success here in the Silicon Slopes community. When did you leave Pluralsight?
It was July 13th. Nope, August 13th of 2020.
What had you leave? What was that?
I mean, it was a grind. I mean, it was.
Oh, I guarantee it.
Yeah, 6 years. I mean, seriously, I like nothing but just the sheer amount of love for Aaron. I think he's on like year 18, 19, I think total.
Yeah.
I mean, that pace for those 6 years. I mean, I think we just came off of like 17 million and like sub 100 employees. And, when we left, it was like close to 650, 2,200 people. And my team was like just under 800 folks and 40 teams, plus, the IPO stuff. I mean, it was, and we built the entire enterprise product end to end. And it's just time. I was exhausted.
What was that ride like? What did you learn during Pluralsight? And you were the chief product officer, correct?
So I started out as the chief product officer, and then the first 9 months I was made the chief experience officer.
Okay.
So running kind of product, and then really product engineering, DevOps, ops, architecture, and content all ended up rolling up into
basically the whole thing.
It was no, not at all.
That's the operation you just described.
Well, the GTM.
That's Pluralsight.
I mean, product market fit. If you don't have a good GTM, product doesn't really mean much. So, So, it was great timing for me to leave, and it was weird times, I think, back then for me personally. So if you think about it, we had the earthquake, you had the Black Lives Matter stuff all popping up, and COVID. And so like all three of those things, plus, me being completely exhausted and, being at home was good for me. Like it was really, really good to really pull my foot off the accelerator and reset.
How much of a break did you take once you left?
I took a pretty decent break as far as like working for companies. I mean, I wasn't doing anything other than just board service or, going to lunches and stuff like that. But it was mostly working on the tree farm. So I worked on the tree farm, and then I did a bunch of construction projects. So like I learned how to lay like concrete, and I'm talking like flat surfaces, really difficult. And then I like learned walls, and then how to pour, different mixture types and different ratios, and just wanted to get into the construction side and build things with my sons. So we built a couple of things, like a gym for Sarah, because Sarah's gym closed, Ute CrossFit, which was super sad. And so we built her a gym, and my sons, we milled all of our logs. We, stood up all of our walls and like built her a gym, and then we like formally handed it off to her like an architect would, to the owner, and then said, hey, like, for any warranty claims, don't point them at me. Yeah.
So you just like did manual labor. And
yeah. I mean, it was all outside.
Cool things. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was all outside. I mean, that was the origin story of how Torus started. Yeah. But it wasn't called Torus. Like a lot of people don't know. I called the company 80, like 8TY. And that's just because I was a nerd around like the engineering and product, like 80%,
right?
80% offsets. Like there was all this like performance-based linearity and like engineering, efficiency that we wanted to have into the name, and then found out that being able to message, market position, and sell 8TY globally wasn't going to work.
Wait, so as you're like doing this concrete, you're like doing these kind of projects with your son, building a gym, all that type of stuff, you're thinking about Torus?
Yeah, so it wasn't Torus. It was, so on the tree farm, on our property, there are 9,000 conifers, like 7 different species of conifers. You have deep water wells, you have low pressure and high pressure water coming through the property. Half of that water is seasonally. And so like right out of the gate, and if you've traveled to Europe a ton, I'm sure you have, it just seems like Europe, one, is just really advanced, in renewable energy thinking, and they're very, very advanced at using like Mother Nature's resources to do the job. Mm-hmm. And so if you, and I'm a huge fan of Amsterdam, have been through the Netherlands a ton. I had to go back to work there a ton for Pluralsight and a former job too for Stryker and Pyramid. And if you know anything about the Netherlands, I mean, they're using wind turbines, whether it's, pumping water from one height to another.
Yeah.
Like they're using hydropower everywhere. I mean, the broader part of the Netherlands and just like Scandinavia is using hydropower, a huge portion of it. So I'm like, well, we've got a bunch of stored power sitting in pressurized irrigation lines. You've got a bunch of water that's flowing down the middle of this creek that you could take advantage of. And so it's like, well, let's figure out a way to take advantage, why we're in COVID lockdowns, to harness all of this Mother Nature's energy. And solar was already a huge thing. And I'm like, well, I mean, if we could get solar, wind, and hydro to consumers, we could leverage all three of those things to, try and offset as much of our consumption as possible. So, I was doing calculations like on 1 inch or 3/4 inch OD, like outside diameter tubing that ran into your house to see how much stored energy we could get to like run, your home as best we could.
Right.
Yeah. So like that was, I mean, there's so much more to say about that.
No, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I was ordering, inline high pressure hydro turbines. I was building my own variations of that. I caught up for anyone, like for the listeners, Spencer Langston owns this company called Langston's Alternative Energy, which is totally like a DIY shop. But Spencer came up with like the 6-inch in diameter jet ski impeller with a 2,500 watt generator on it for high pressure hydro turbines. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. Like they're using this to run homes, to run farms, to do sprinkler irrigation. And that was just super inspiring while we were trying to figure out how to get water across a lot of acreage on this tree farm.
Yeah. Where do you live? Where's this tree farm?
Yeah. So it's in Sandy. Okay. I know that sounds cliche, but it backs the Dimpledale Gully, and the Dimpledale Gully is like 800 acres.
Okay.
But we bought a family tree farm called the Wallen Tree Farm. It's been around since 1963.
Oh, sweet.
I knew this whole area very, very well.
Sure.
So when Sarah and I moved back from Michigan, we were looking for places that kind of lived between our two parents' homes. Uh-huh. And obviously the Dimpledale Gully was like home to her and I. It's where we ran. It's where I grew up as a little kid, 12 years old, running around, with BB guns. Mm-hmm. And so we looked in that area, and sure enough, the Wallens were willing to give us a slice of heaven. And it really has, man. It's just been beautiful.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you're working on all of this, and at what point do you think like, hey, I could actually create a product here? Yeah. I could create a company inside of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, in other interviews, like I jumped to like the end.
Yeah.
But I do want to, just because it's you and I, and I have a deep affinity with you. Do you remember our fireside shack down in St. George?
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah. I mean,
that was awesome.
It's an amazing memory for me.
That was fun.
So the deal was, so I'll start with the problem. The problem was, when you look at renewable energy holistically, there's like three things we really lack. But the main goal is we lack the education. Like as a person that lives in a home, mm-hmm. like we're disconnected from the generation, use, and storage of power.
Yeah.
Like we hook our homes up to a power source, and then we just live our lives. And I think, when you work outside a lot, and you work outside a lot in farming, you get very connected to weather patterns.
Yeah.
And that happened for me, like in a big way. And I already had like a huge connection to this when I was a little boy. I worked in a lot of nurseries when I grew up, but I was very connected. I was a very energetic person that was like really difficult to harness my level of activity.
That's sweet.
Yeah, in classrooms. And so immediately I was like, okay, so, we're tree farming. We can only tree farm kind of on the ends of a season, so spring or fall. Mm-hmm. That's just because of how conifers work.
Wait, what kind of trees?
They're pine trees.
Oh,
well,
okay.
I say pine trees, but they're the broad name is conifers, and then you have firs and pines and different types of species. But really, like the only times you can harvest them are in the spring and in the fall.
Okay.
Which have a lot of inclement weather.
Sure.
Inherently within them. So that was a big deal. Like I got super connected to weather patterns and have been connected to those for years, not just, in the COVID year. Like we were already struggling through pressurized and low pressure irrigation lines for like better part of 5 years. And it was having a hard time scaling or getting it to work. And it was extremely expensive to water, like really expensive.
I guarantee it.
Yeah. So
it's like you're running a water park.
Yeah, it really is. So the deal is if you just look at solutions that live, and I kind of start at the higher order, like maybe Occam's razor approach of like, well, how is this problem being solved today? And really, you have amazing hardware companies and you have amazing software companies, but you don't have integrated IoT companies that know how to build kind of the end-to-end solution. And my career started in hardware, then firmware, then software. And my roots to me were kinetic things like ambulance cots or stair chairs or hospital evacuation sleds, like being able to build something with my hands and then connect it to technology to change, a person's point of view or perspective on how those things cohesively came together. That was something that I saw was a big opportunity to be able to tie those ecosystems together. And I think, 4 sons, Clint, I genuinely am, I am worried, dude. Like,
really,
I'm worried about like what does Avani, Limau's, and Ryder's life look like?
Yeah, for sure.
I have a 13-year-old, and so like the next 10 years, the next 10 years, the next 10 years. If you just look at in 10-year tranches, like what does our current environment look like? And
you're talking like climate.
Yeah, well, I mean climate, geopolitically, everything kind of going on.
Oh yeah, everything's crazy.
Yeah, and so I was like, well, how do you build and engineer something that would live on well beyond my life?
Yeah.
Something that's sustainable, like mined sustainably. You still have to use precious minerals or whatever to mine it, but how could you build something that would last for a very long time? So if you kind of go back to the origination of the idea, so more of it was like the management of it, and has anyone built, kind of a perspective there? And the other part was storage. And I just started with chemical batteries. I mean, like that's
interesting.
Like I just wanted to be like, well, could you store this energy in chemical batteries? And I had a lot of experience in the early days. So when I sold Paramed to Stryker, we were powered ambulance cots, powerlifting devices, but we were using 24 and 48 volt lithium ion batteries to lift somebody from, 13 inches to 40 inches over and over again. And I'm like, well, surely battery technology has evolved. That is a solid no, it has not.
Really?
It really hasn't. Battery technology, chemical battery, lithium iron and lithium iron phosphate batteries, like really haven't.
What about these car batteries?
I would say no.
Really?
As far as the maybe production technology, but the chemistry
hasn't changed.
Is still suffering from the same, same problems. So, charge and discharge rates, 100% discharge, memory loss, ambient temperature fluctuations, all the things that batteries suffered from when we were building them at scale, those are the problems that persist today. And that's where myself, Miles, who's my third son, and Avin, my oldest son, we sat in my office in Sandy, and we did the very first flywheel energy storage calculation together around, could you build a mechanical battery that could store power?
Yeah.
And both of those guys, math, Miles in math he's good at math. And so it was really fun, a really fun exercise to just run the calculations for energy density, storage, how long, discharge rates, what are the real strategic advantages of a mechanical battery versus chemistry. And that really was like, okay, energy management and storage, those two things could bridge a pretty meaningful impact for not only today, but for years to come.
Yeah. And so at what point are you like, all right, let's put some fuel on the fire here. We figured something out. And what was the kind of like the eureka moment? Like, hey, we've got something here.
Well, Gil, my co-founder, right? Gil. Yeah. So Gil and I have been building stuff for years.
Yeah.
So, he was off on his own like artistic journey. And so, I called Gil up and said, hey, come and take a look at all this stuff. And then, let's take a look at the whiteboard together and just see what you think. And I think, if you know anything about Gil and you know anything about his story, He was born and raised in the Philippines, was an immigrant to this country, non-English speaking, and then landed in LA and basically had to build everything from the ground up. And if you looked at like what our company could do for a marginalized community, for someone in the Philippines, like a single Torus flywheel could power 30 homes in the Philippines. That kind of took he and I's world, like relative to social impact and like ongoing use and meaning. It really tied kind of what I think he and I's core values together at the hip. And so to us, it was kind of a no-brainer of how could we, build a company in our, I'll call it, I know this is like cliche, I'll own this later, but I don't know if this will age well, but like if you're going to build your kind of final company or product, like let's do something that takes all of the decades worth of experience, put it into one team and build something that survives well beyond.
It's a legacy.
Yeah. So somewhere like well beyond Gil and I's life that has nothing to do with like our names. It has everything to do with like, hey, energy storage that could last for 25, 50, 100 years, long duration, short duration. We need that. Like the world needs that.
Yeah.
And there's this technology here that allows you to pull it off. Flywheel's been around forever.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not novel. The intellectual property to build this wheel was super hard and really novel. But we need 10 companies. We need 10 Torus stations. I mean, in the U.S. today, call it 121 million developed households. In developed countries, 1.92 billion. And so, like, you need so many of us to really help decarbonize, decentralize, and kind of digitize the future of renewables.
What did Gil think when he saw it all?
Yeah, I think. So I mean, of course, Gil's passion around the mechanical battery.
This is your third company you've done together, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, the mechanical battery. I think it begs more questions than answers. So I think everyone's thoughts and reactions around once you understand how it works, you get more excited about it. But the software side and the firmware side. I mean, all of our passions, Gil's passions around being able to design and engineer a user experience that educates consumers around energy generation, use, and management. Yeah. I mean, you can get up every single day and hear or see or watch a customer's surprise and delight on them being in control of generation, use, and consumption. And the main thing is most homeowners, including myself, what is a little household going to do to climate change?
Yeah.
Nothing, right? I mean, that's what they feel. And then once you understand that, one, you can make an impact, and then once you understand you're part of a broader community, that's where you make huge shifts. Like big shifts in psychology, big shifts in thinking of, hey, collectively we can truly decarbonize, we can decentralize, we can even help stabilize, this grid that needs to expand.
What was the manufacturing process like early on?
Yeah, it was a disaster. So I mean, kind of cool things happened. I know you ask all the questions, but you need to talk too here. So in Springville, we have
you have a plant in Springville?
Yeah, Springville.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so manufacturing today is in Springville across 3 buildings. That all moves to Salt Lake. We
Off
have
the freeway?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's just past the freeway.
Okay.
But we were yeah, I mean, if you drove there, you would understand like early stage seed startup culture. I mean, it is just metal buildings.
I love it.
Sitting on a gravel parking lot that, I mean, they're
yeah, that's sweet.
It was rough. Yeah. So, the first thing we did, we've gone through 7 different iterations of flywheel energy storage, like different energy density, different kind of builds from the ground up. Like, how do you want to hold a wheel or press a wheel together? Like, there's just so much. Yeah, it's hard to describe just the level of iterations that you have to do in order to get to a production level energy storage device. So Gil and I really built the native iOS and Android application, the CNS firmware, and like the first pass of what we called Futaba 1, which is our prototype wheel. And really we showed kind of team members first, and then broader, investors or markets, to kind of understand if we had something that could fit in a market. We showed them that version. And that version was, not just two people in a PowerPoint. It was like, hey, here's what we believe could be possible if we were to really double down and take this down. And so I'd say like the native iOS and Android from a core functionality was really aimed at kind of speeds and feeds and education to consumers. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the full breadth of like integrating the energy operating system of someone's home, which is what we do today.
Right.
But it was to show, hey, we could hook a piece of software up to a piece of like CPU board firmware that we invented, designed, and engineered to a mechanical thing. And as soon as we kind of showed, folks that we could do that, then that's where I think we really caught fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was pitching it like? Like, did you pitch to all the Utah firms, outside firms? So
I think that this is probably the most interesting part of the story. So, in my career, I've raised a ton of money.
Sure.
And I really wanted to go the non-traditional route, even though maybe the route that would look maybe a little weird to traditional investment.
Sure.
So the funny part about this is I really went to like very Utah. I'm a very Utah obsessed person, very Utah centered. So we really went to Utah investors. And then, the cliche is Iconic ended up kind of seeing what we had built, and they said, hey, we'll go ahead and take the first half of the round. And it was kind of a bummer because I really had the investor cohort handpicked all the way down the path, ready for closing. And that was like phone calls to say, hey, allocations are, either none or very little. And so we did 2 rounds. The first round was kind of that first tranche to get us all the way through what I think is kind of what felt a lot more commercial. Mm-hmm. And then that second half was really to kind of get us right on the front doorstep of production. And that's, manufacturing of boards, manufacturing of wheels plus software, and being able to hire a team that could at least show to the community we could scale. And so that was that second round. So we did 2 rounds, and that second round was amazing. It was almost all Utah investors, very strategic, like investors that's indicative to help our mission out.
Yeah.
Huge shout out to Nick from Epic Ventures. He has been the most unbelievable VC from day one, and he's in it for climate. Like, I mean, they're passionate about bringing climate change, to Utah. And there's just like nobody's really focused on this.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice to have money in Utah that starts to be really not only just interested, but they actually want to take a very personal interest in how we can do it.
Well, he and the crew over there at Epic, they're probably thinking legacy too. Like Kent and Nick and the whole team over there has got to be thinking like, man, let's do something incredible.
Yeah, I think that's the way I've experienced them.
Yeah.
Up to this point it's been amazing. Even, with, great venture capital partners, he has made all of these intros and has never asked, for anything in return. It's just, how do I create more tailwinds for you and for this business?
Yeah.
And that has been awesome, especially with subject matter experts, or, hey, there's like some technology that's advancing over here. Have you taken a look at this? And this is weekly. I mean, this is not somebody, in order for us to be successel, we need a lot of luck and we need a lot of friends, to help us get there. Talent only takes you so far. And I'll tell you, like, we've had that in spades on this round.
Yeah. It's interesting to see Utah rally around you. And it became clear that you made a concerted effort to get Utah investors and Utah VCs in, because as you know, like the really big companies, like the Qualtrics, the Pluralsights, even the Domos and these types of, maybe they had a little Utah money, but not a lot. Some of them none.
Yeah.
And so when those exit happens, most of that money leaves and goes Bay Area or New York City, right? Yep. And so for you to even be thinking about that or even caring about that is super unique.
Yeah,
right?
Is Utah first.
Yeah.
And I think what's cool is I think if any of those success stories do happen here, that money will go back here. And I deeply, deeply care. You know this. I mean, it is, I'll get emotional about it. Like I believe we have the best community in the world here.
Yeah.
I think we have the most talented individuals. I think our economy is diverse. I think our leadership is amazing. But I do think the teams in Utah can build to be something greater than anyone has really ever seen.
And still it's hard. Like, I mean, a Conic shows up and you're
It's
like, what are you going to do?
It's a grind.
Yeah. It's still hard to like take only Utah money,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and that probably doesn't even make sense for the business at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I would say I would 100% agree. I mean, raising money around investor thesis and targets and mandates, all the cliche, yes, and it's not fun, you know. Yeah. And I know you know this, and I think all these listeners know this, but like the venture capital climate doesn't even resemble like what it looked like in 2021 and before.
Yeah.
It's not even the same ecosystem anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird. Now, like being profitable and all that stuff, like it's not growth at all costs anymore. Is that what you're experiencing?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think it's even harder for us because we're IoT. So hardware requires a ton of capital expense up front.
Mm-hmm.
And that smells or feels like a B2B enterprise SaaS revenue feeding a GTM demand engine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, hey, it doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Like I promise you, when you look at the hardware and firmware that comes out the other side of this thing, it has margin on it.
Yeah.
And like you get to hold me accountable to that margin basis. And if you don't see a free cash flow number at the end of that, then, you know, don't do it.
Have you been following this LK99 stuff?
I haven't.
Is that what it's called? Like, like where they've been able to do like basically do like superconductor type stuff at room temperature?
Yes, I have.
Is that, I don't know if it's called LK99. I could be saying it wrong.
I don't know either. So I was following semiconductor stuff kind of prior to that innovation, but it was still using a bunch of chemistry to do it.
Yeah.
For magnet levitation bearings. So to levitate flywheels on the bottom bearing, basically you could float the axle. It'd stay, you know, axial located, but you didn't have to use passive or magnets, you know, passive or active magnet arrays. Huge technology, but then you had to put a giant condenser on the side of the freeway for EV charging. You know, and that just didn't work. So the innovation here is huge. Yeah. Like it's massive.
How come Elon hasn't done Torus yet?
Yeah, so here's the deal.
Do you get that question a lot?
Yeah, I do.
I'm sure.
Elon, he would never be interested. I say never, but I don't think he would ever be interested in this. I think the direct feedback he would say is you aim too low. I mean, if you look at things he's done in his life, it doesn't look like 200-year-old technology being enabled. You know, he's like, hey, I could launch another 50 satellites and just eclipse the entire internet business.
Yeah.
And, you know, his numerical numbers, like to go, you know, enact change, you know, it's like 15, 16 billion a quarter. What could we go execute that would leapfrog us, 10 years? And I think kind of the crawl, the walk, the run. I do think the run side of our business has that level of strategy.
Oh, for sure. I think he would see the opportunity.
I do.
It could be the biggest company to ever come out of Utah you've got here.
Yeah, I think if we showed him EV charging technology on like a 48-inch diameter wheel, I think for his infrastructure, for his Tesla semis, I think that's an absolute. I mean, we can discharge batteries. It's called C rating. So you think about chemical batteries can charge and discharge over that like a 4 to 6 hour window. Flywheels can discharge its entire payload in like 4 minutes. And so if you think about semis on the side of the road, like being able to charge and discharge, we can discharge massive payloads. You know, you can start in milliseconds, but you can dump 50 kilowatt hours in 4 minutes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So there's there's really cool things that you can do for EV charging and EV storage, but for, commercial and industrial buildings and for residential businesses, that's kind of the whole map.
Yeah.
Like if we talk about like the corporate strategy, the strategy is you have like power generation on one side, and even on the generation with like solar, wind, coal, natural gas, you don't have much buffer and you don't have much technology control. It's mostly pricing, honestly. Like if you look at pricing sensitivity, like if you look at day ahead rates, they're looking at prices of power and you're guessing what weather's going to do the next day. So,
That's so crazy.
Like to me, dude, there's not much sophistication. So you have some technology that lives over here. But if you think about a generating and storing economy this side of the meter for commercial buildings, for like any commercial structure whatsoever, and homes, I mean, you can be just as strong.
Yeah.
If people really catch on to like what EV adoption looks like, if people really catch on to like, hey, collectively as a community, we can be as strong as this community over here with more control, with more integration, with more like prediction. Like that's where we win. Like the whole grid, all boats rise.
Yeah.
If you have both ecosystems and really can control both of those worlds. So we built all the hardware, firmware, software to do that.
Yeah.
And that's like we're kind of an N of one implementing those systems.
Does it surprise you like what you just said could be perceived as political in some circles?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, I'm definitely in the middle of those conversations.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like where people are like arguing with you over like, I mean, in the political sense, right? Like,
I'll give you a famous quote.
Yeah.
So there's like, there's a lot of things that get said. There's climate change, and then there's climates can change. And like, and there's one side of the aisle that believes that climates can change, and the other side believes that there's climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe the science is proving out that we do have something to solve for.
Sure.
Yeah, sooner than later, but it is very politically charged.
Yeah, it's just a really interesting. I mean, everything is politically charged. It's really interesting. I mean, best example in my lifetime is the pandemic, right? That became like a political thing.
It was rough,
which was fascinating, and became super divisive. And I think we're in a whole new political world actually post a pandemic, which is just an odd thing when you think about like what our politics have become. And like something like, hey, let's figure out different sources of energy, ways to improve the way we go about the world. How is that a political thing? Yeah,
I don't think it is. And if you look at large power and utility, I mean, they probably are. That's a person, that's a group or an entity or like a social construct you would never want to push away from the table when you're inventing solutions like this.
Right.
Because they've been at it for almost 100 years, and they built resiliency, they built scale, they have all of these knowledge workers.
Yeah.
So in the transition, it's like, bring them all here, because I've only got a team of like 65 people, and your teams of thousands have been trying to solve this. How have you solved this problem, and how could we get there quicker?
Yeah.
It's like leveraging both sides of the communities without political ecosystems. And I do believe the people that work in those companies, they see the same thing. I think that's happening at a different layer. And really it is like getting down into like the working cohorts of those layers to want to solve those problems and build resiliency and scale. That's where it is, like Clint, it's hard to describe how much fun it is. It is so fun to work with operators that see it. Rocky Mountain Power, amazing partners for us.
Great.
Like they want batteries on the grid. They want consumers to buy batteries to put them on the grid. We need batteries in certain locations to stabilize certain parts of the grid. St. George, right? Orange days, like from 3 o'clock till 7 o'clock. Mill Creek had an outage here. I mean, this is not like happening in California.
Yeah.
We're here. Like we are right here, and we need consumers to help grow and stabilize the grid.
Yeah.
So like we need both halves going right now.
As you think about, and I'm sure you have, but you've also got to stay focused when you're building a company on like, all right, we got to solve for this, we got to solve for this, and there's a whole path, right?
Yeah.
But if you just jump to like the end and Torus works, doesn't that change the world?
Yeah, I think I want to say yes, it does. I think the things that keep me up at night is just how do you scale to that level?
Yeah, I mean, right now you're in like, I got to make payroll, I got to, figure out manufacturing, I got to figure out cost structure, all this type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But like if it works.
It's and
holy smokes.
I mean, we've had installed units since December of 2021. Results, you've seen me kind of tweet some like things around the corner, but what I've really wanted to do is put a cohort of like pretty big groupings of homes, like 30, 50 homes in a cohort, and say, hey, just so everyone can see this, all of these cohorted homes right here are living predominantly completely off the grid north of 85% of the time every day, and they've expanded electrification of appliances and EVs. And so if you looked at the aggregate of those homes over the course of a 12-month calendar year, it's 67%. So that means they're reducing resilience on the grid by 67%. And if you think about decarbonization efforts and you saw that at scale, that is a very good use case of what it could look like. And I do think, we live in a duck curve. We wake up at the same time every day. We go to bed at the same time. So we're cooking and using at the same time. Like with Torus, it basically draws a straight line through it, right, at your base load of how much you pull from the grid and lowers it. And then I think when winter comes, right, you have a peak there. And then we need to solve for society the energy storage problem in that curve for 3 months.
Yeah.
And if you can solve that, I think that, like just what I said, the first half, not the bump, that takes your carbon intensity score that's north of 417 and lowers it kind of right back to 200, 250 societally. And that's kind of when we were,
crazy.
I think it's totally doable.
By the way, it financially makes sense too. It's not like they're making a sacrifice. Like Torus is actually like really good.
That's exactly right.
From a financial standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. Payback is, well, I mean, it's just like, I think about any appliance, air conditioning units, 15, 25 years. I mean, Torus lasts for 25 years.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's just, and energy costs are not going to be flat. Okay. Yeah. EVs, when you add it, I mean, it's just, everything is up and to the right. So the more you can buy it now, the better,
Yeah, it's fascinating as you think about, like, it does seem like capitalism and entrepreneurs might be the thing that solved this thing more than governments, because governments, for whatever reason, seem to be getting in the way. I mean, we already talked about it. Like, these types of things are political, like figuring out different ways to produce energy, cheaper ways to produce energy, reduce our carbon. All these things are like, why wouldn't we be trying to do that? Yeah. That's like a political debate.
It is.
And so, but for entrepreneurs and in the realm of capitalism, let's just like solve it.
It is.
And make it, financially beneficial. Yeah. And then problem solved.
Yeah. You want me to give a fun example of that? Uh-huh. So so when you add a battery to someone's house or a thermostat or an EV charger, at a high level on the product side, that's called a DER, a designated energy resource. Okay, and then large-scale utility companies have a DERMS, which is a designated energy resource management tool. And what they want to do is they want to integrate those two things together, right? And the reason why is because the grid suffers from instability from frequency regulation or demand response. So a big giant demand hits it, causes infrequency, and then they need to stabilize it else you get brownouts and blackouts. So here's why, like, private sector versus political. So on the private sector side, if you bring hardware, firmware, and software engineers from world-class backgrounds, and you'll appreciate this being a technologist, and the technologist will appreciate this, the testing environment that you use to test that is mailed to you on a thumb drive. And the last update was in 2018.
Really?
Yes. So if you want to use what's called a DER client that gets installed, that DER client is local. So if you think about cloud-based architecture with, OTA cloud-based deployments, like my world, of like, man, we could build very modern architecture that solves a pretty, honestly, it's a pretty difficult problem that's agnostic of any DER that you could just ingest and be able to command and control. But yet the client software, it's not akin to on-prem, but we're scratching the surface of not much innovation.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, when we took a first cut at that, I mean, our 90-day sandbox prototypes, I mean, all serverless, all OTA, hardware, firmware, software, like completely DER client DEMS enabled. And then we passed all of your local like DERMS calls, whether it was an inverter or a battery or anything. And then you can aggregate that, put some buffer against it, and then show a large scale utility, hey, you've got 100 megawatt hours, of storage, and you've got 100 megawatts of flow here. And feel free to turn any knob or dial, and it will go out and just talk to all those devices through that technology and help. The private sector did a rapid prototype, a sandbox of that in 90 days. It's hard to kind of size it up, but it probably was on the order of a decade to kind of get us to the clone file that lives on that hard drive.
That's incredible.
And so again, like people who are listening to this, we need a lot of really smart people aimed at this problem, developing solutions, and we can solve it. Like I know for sure the private sector and the capitalist markets can solve it.
Who is your customer? So it sounds like you kind of have two customers. You got like the energy, like a Rocky Mountain Power would be in some way, at least like a strategic partner, if not a customer themselves. Yeah. And then just the average consumer as well.
Yeah, dude. I mean, this is where I got owned.
Really?
Oh, I got cleaned up aisle 5 on this. So I a lot of it is I designed the customer journey to kind of own every section and then pull out parts that, either were duplicative or, things that were commoditized. And so akin to the solar industry, like Flat Brim, Solar Bros, Knocking Doors, like dude, just living through that, like starting this company and trying to educate the market, we're not that. That's been hard. Like that has been a very, very difficult, especially in Utah.
Yeah.
It has been, so that was
we're good at that stuff.
I know.
Yeah.
We are. So it'll come full circle. So we designed the entire customer journey, direct web checkout. We wanted it digitally optimized, and then you have your site visit, your customer, your quote, and then 2 nonlinear processes, which is financing and installation and permitting. Those are no fun. And then, you want to own the rest of the customer story for first-time user experience, one-way door. You only get one time to do that with someone, and then ongoing use and maintenance. And you want to own the customer journey forever. And really what happened is it was like a net metering, like solar deal sold that had an ROI payback against a net metering, which was truly not carbon, like decarbonizing, right? Offsets. It was more like a savings play.
Right.
And so people were pretty pissed. Like, it's like, hey, I was sold a lot of capital equipment on a term loan for 25 years that's kind of aged, and it really didn't pay back.
Sure.
So that was like, I mean, that's 2 years of just getting it handed to me of like, okay, the GTM is a lot more complex here.
Yeah.
I thought the product was gonna be hard. I mean, honestly, the go-to-market was, is vicious. It just chewed me up and spit me out.
Yeah.
So really what we found out is when you go to market with partners. And the reason why, and I'm talking residential, you go to market with partners. And it's because one side of the partner house owns the financial transaction and relationship of hardware. So like when they look at a credit score, a credit worthiness of an individual is then matched to, the hardware that's approved by UL, like a UL listed product that goes through all the governance that you need. So that is a nonlinear process that big, massive incumbents are experts at. So I don't know why we didn't do that, but I learned that lesson. And so, giving our business up to those guys. And the second part is just permitting.
Yeah.
So installation and permitting are nonlinear, and they have all types of like variables there.
Are you dealing with like various municipalities
100%.
And city, like county governments?
Yes.
That all kind of have different regulations and things like that?
Yeah, and just number of bodies. Like bigger cities, it's like like an enterprise sales motion, like the higher up the sales, like the ticket item, the more stakeholders you have to get involved.
Yeah.
Dude, the same strategy.
Interesting.
Is like the larger city, you have like a 5-to-1 ratio. Yeah. So then you need an entire coverage team to get all the stakeholders bought in to close, win the deal.
Interesting.
And so it's very similar. Only, they take a lot longer because of the nature of what's happening. But Arizona, like things we could do here, Clint, that would be super beneficial is Arizona's 1-day permitting, same-day permitting. So like you don't have to wait 8 months to get a permit. Like my hope here is that we move to like a 1-day permit, like solar plus storage. That's a known entity. As long as they sit on an approved vendor list through these 2 entities, we should do same-day permits.
Yeah.
If we really want to go make a change.
Yeah.
So like lots of things we can add on the capital market side to put pressure to say, hey, let's go. Like, why is this taking so long?
How long are we in Utah?
I could pull up our dashboard. When we first started More About Us, it was like 141 days. But now it's closer to like 74 days. And that's true. Like that's legitimately from the design to turning in the permit from engineering, call it 70 days straight up to get a system on someone's roof and commissioned.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So why are you moving from Springville to Salt Lake for the manufacturing?
Yeah. You want to know the irony?
Yeah.
Power.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we need 4,000 amps of power to build flywheels. And, all the commercial guys that are going to listen to this, even people on our cap table, 56 weeks to get a transformer, to get switchgear in, 56 weeks. I mean, sometimes it's a year and a half, 2 years. So we had, one building in Orem. Well, actually it was in Pleasant Grove, 75,000 square feet. Got all the way down to the signed LOI and then talked to power. And we could not get actual hardware or gear installed in that building in, 57, 58 weeks. Jeez. The other building, we were just down the road here, 86 weeks to get 4,000 amps. And so we literally found a building that had 4,000 amps ready to go, but we had to wait almost 2.5 years to get the building. And so, yeah, I mean, it's so ironic to me. It's actually pretty infuriating. So, we'll put rooftop solar flywheels to help load shift, production. So when products come off the line, we can truly say, we've decarbonized the actual construction of our products. But just finding a building with that much power was hard. Guaranteed.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I wouldn't even thought about. I can't believe it takes that long. Yeah. By the way,
COVID. It's a byproduct of COVID and production and chips and gear and.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
As you think about kind of what's next, and as you grow this thing and build it, what feedback are you currently getting from your current customers that's kind of helping you navigate moves you make in the future?
Yeah, I think I underestimated. I feel like our team has really wrapped their head nicely around residential or consumer. Mm-hmm. I think we've done a good job on the app, the firmware, and then really just doing a good job, on the production side. So I think we understand that we'll be able to pin that market down fairly well. And when I say I'm like a 70% confidence interval. Mm-hmm. Like the other 30% is a boatload of work and very difficult, but enough that you don't question product market fit at all. Mm-hmm. Like I know we have the right product for this market and it fits and it has the right incentive structure, for power and utility and for consumers and for partners. Those three things are cohesive. And it's really just turning a couple of knobs and dials to get us there and making sure we can production scale. I think I completely underestimated the opportunity in the commercial space. I didn't really realize that like a manufacturer, and we could choose a bunch of them here in the Wasatch Front, whether it's Dannon or Pepsi or Parker Hannifin, any of these big guys, their actual production. And you'd think this is funny because I would know this because I need 4,000 amps to build flywheels. Mm-hmm. Those are hundreds or sometimes even thousands of homes, depending on how big they are, on the demands of power on our grid in that one building. So if you can figure out demand response windows for them, instead of them getting like ICE generators, they could use Torus instead of an ICE generator. So you get the decarbonization, you get the command and control, you get the expansion of grid resilience. So a 200 megawatt or 200 megawatt hour is substantial. And one of those large buildings could get that installation, actually provide resiliency back. And so I totally didn't fully understand how you could connect all three ecosystems together when we started. I think we fully have a vision for that, which means, we need to work that much harder and that much more quickly on trying to understand those power dynamics across those economies. Yeah.
It seems like to really scale this thing, you're going to need a lot of capital.
Yeah. Or
is that not true?
Well, I think the capital you need is more in manufacturing equipment.
Oh, I see.
It's not, once you get product out into the market, there's enough short-term and long-term margin in that product, that makes it pretty lucrative. So a good way for you to think about how the model could work and what we're doing today is if kind of capital constraints are there for the commercial sectors. One, large-scale utility have great incentive programs that give tailwinds to paybacks. So that pays back things in, under 5 years. And then basically it's an asset that produces revenue. So that's one way to think about it. The second way to think about it is a large-scale utility like in California offers a per event incentive. And then essentially that cost is amortized either in a lease or it's amortized in capital loan programs over the course of 25 years or 15 years. And so if you're a company that does have quite a bit of cash on the balance sheet, aka Tesla, then you can walk into Texas, put a 4,500 unit deployment together, and have a very meaningful impact to the grid. Very meaningful impact, where you're putting megawatt hours of grid resiliency and stability. And like they did a great job of proving, hey, and that's a pretty small deployment. I mean, given 121 households, 4,500 households stabilize massive sections of populations in Texas. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome.
Incredible, actually.
Yeah.
That's super fascinating. So what have you learned about leadership? You've been in all these various companies. You're leading this company now. Over the years, what have you learned? Like, what does it mean to be a great leader?
Yeah. And that's another 90 minutes. Mission, vision, strategy, core values, guiding principles. I think if you do not have that very clearly defined before execution, it's a rough road to haul. And then I would say that you need to come back to that whatever your cadence is, that needs to show up throughout the DNA of your business. Every time you reset an operating plan, reset a cadence, reset a new perspective, you got to come back to those philosophical truths. Companies are people. Products don't care. People do. People really care. And so I've always been a huge proponent of making sure that you do the work with people in order to produce the products that go and change societies. And I think, Clint, this from, some of your coaching work and your work around leadership in your intention is huge. The words that come out of my mouth, every word, is a point of creation.
Yeah, it has an impact outside of you.
Every word. And people, people experience, the only experience people have of you is what we're doing right here.
Exactly
They're not in my brain. And so a lot of people speak from a point of reference of intrinsic thinking, and that kind of lands on, and the way I was raised, the way it's brought up. And so then I exit words out of my mouth, and that just lands really flat on a very unique population of individuals that have all that same stuff going on. And so if you don't create very intentional language around what you are trying to accomplish, and you don't feed and nurture that thing often, and especially when you scale, when you add hundreds of people to this, as a leader, it's almost not being an operator. It's being a communicator.
Yeah.
You have to communicate what operators and individual contributors need to do and how they're connected to what we're doing, and then just what experiences they're creating and what experiences we want to create for people to get it done. And so I think kind of a master's clinic in the last 25 years of just getting completely decimated by my own, my own issues that I have as a leader, and then getting those mirrors kind of pointed back at me, looking at the dead bodies that I've created through poor leadership tactics, or failed products and failed missions, have taught me to be I don't know what I am today, but I'm trying to be the very best that I possibly can, of trying to
Well,
produce
it's the
outcomes.
scale that's a mind boggle for me, is you can do it you get 20, 30 people on a team and all of that stuff starts to work. And then all of a sudden, we're growing so fast, hey, now there's 90 people on the team. That's triple what you just had. And now you've basically got to do it all over again.
Yeah.
Right? Is that kind of how it feels?
Yeah. I think maybe 2 points of view, the first 100 people at your company sets, I think the entire culture for the next 500 you add.
Oh, interesting.
So because those are all of the +1 and 2 layers of your business. And what's interesting is even when you hire an individual contributor who might not be a +1 or 2, that person has so much influence all the way up and down the chain. Culturally, it completely shifts. We have a firmware engineer who's phenomenal, who was really our N of 5 employees. Okay, this person doesn't have any desires to want to run huge portions of the company, but influentially, socially, through social contracts and agreements, he has as much influence across. So we're not at 100 employees yet, but this contributor is hugely influential across how we see the world. And making sure those seats on the bus are pretty tightly aligned. And when they spin out, you give them a call or they're hijacked and be like, hey, what's happening. I'm hearing some things in these pockets of the organization, and as a leader, you gotta handle it like right away, else you will lose the helm of that ship pretty quick.
What are some examples of great leaders you've worked with, great leaders you've learned from, leaders you've seen like, hey, I think they've done that really well? I mean, I don't want you to name the ones that you don't think have done well, but even like the ones that like, hey, this is what I don't want to do.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting.
Like I could go individuals, but frameworks that probably were the most counterintuitive frameworks that I didn't appreciate until scale.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that happened when Paramed was bought by Stryker, John Brown, the CEO of that company, was the only publicly traded company to grow organically for 20 straight years in the billions.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's, just his story of thousands upon thousands of people being added to 16 decentralized units that are global multinational. He grew the performance of that business and the culture for 20 years. And so when I got acquired, we were in 1 million square feet, 8,000 employees.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, we were 330 employees. And I walked into the first 1 million square feet of that manufacturing floor, and I looked at that culture and I'm like, oh, this is going to suck. It was like Dockers and, like collars. It was everything. And that was, I wasn't like hoodies and flip-flops by any stretch, but it was a massive cultural shift. But when you pulled the layers back to John Brown and you understood like what he was trying to accomplish, and here's the big takeaway for me, is he used a methodology, and I think it probably was even manufactured, built, and engineered off his cultural perspective, but they used the Gallup profile. The Gallup profile basically took strengths and weaknesses of individuals. So my bottom 5, right, are paired with somebody's top 5.
Mm-hmm. And
then you live in kind of 2-year intervals matched with those people. So something that was interesting early in my career is I was like a finisher. I was a starter that could get you like all the way down to 20,000 feet of operating.
Mm-hmm.
But the 20,000 to like a foot off the ground, no. Mm-hmm. Like the details of the T and the I that needed, absolutely not. So what ended up happening is, and Sarah Marie knows this, so Sarah Marie Puterbaugh was the head of regulatory and quality for all of EMS.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to share a desk together, an office together. So she was a finisher, like to the nth degree, on a class 2 medical device, 510K. As hardcore as it could get regulatory wise.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, mission, vision, strategy, product and engineering execution. And at 20,000 feet, it's like, you'll make the rest work. And she's like, you wished. And so literally the conversations that her and I had on a whiteboard were probably some of the best educational and learning experience I've ever had in my career that made me a finisher. Like Sarah Marie literally made me a finisher. And she then got all the skills of being able to mission, vision, strategy, and why some of the things in here would need to be horseshoes and hand grenades.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't need to know why we're shaving 40 thousandths off of a spacer right now. We don't need to know that. But up here we would need to go. And I'm telling you, that was the elasticity that John built into that business.
That's cool.
And it was super, super amazing. And so that was one thing that I culturally really tried when you hire teams to know, hey, I'm early stage seed into maybe revenue producing venture into late stage venture, and then whatever you're going to be. When you hire human capital into a business, be super intentional around when to put people into those certain plays. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. As you think about Utah and any roadblocks or rain clouds you think we might be seeing, what could we do better just from a Utah leadership standpoint? Obviously get permitting down to 1 day.
Yeah, that'd be huge.
Would be a good one.
Yeah, I'm like, I think, again, I'm pretty tactical.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never really involved in the political ecosystem at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been towed more into that right now, and then I kind of have more of a much better view of what's happening more broadly across our state. I even say the western half of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You just barely had someone who I love, which was John Curtis.
Yeah.
And if you know, and I don't know if you guys covered this in detail, but John is actually the head of the Climate Action Committee for the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And he was one of the second or third people I met after I had kind of gotten all the way down to product market fit.
Oh, cool.
And so sitting with him, he invited me to the Republican Climate Action. And I mean, you have to understand, like, as a renewable energy guy,
yeah,
me going to a Republican Climate Action Committee,
that's awesome.
I wondered what I was going to walk into.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm not a politically charged guy whatsoever.
Sure.
And you know what? Those people put their pants on the same way.
Yeah.
They have the same concerns for their constituents. And I think they have the same, outcomes. They want to, but like, we need to agree on like what we're trying to take down.
Yeah.
And the great thing about America, Clint, is, really focused on building, the American culture, which does has capitalist tendencies to it. And I really enjoy that aspect because I think that's what breeds innovation. Now, the thing I feel like, you need good humans, like good people that treat humans fair. And that is a big deal of like, and I don't know, back in the 80s, I think I said something about this earlier, but like, it just felt like we knew how to have conversations and we were a lot more friendly. And like, if somebody was in need, you just went and helped them.
Sure.
Like building these bridges. I feel like we need to build those bridges. I feel like, I'm saying everything probably everyone else said, but as somebody who had to design and engineer a lot of products for primacy goals, for trigger action loops to try and get people engaged in things, like we're toast, man. Like we got to get rid of all of it.
Yeah.
Like we need to get people to lift their head back up, get off of devices, get off of algorithms, and start enjoying, block parties, like helping neighbors do things. So I think that's like one big thing that's super present for me. Just getting people off screens, off algorithms.
Social media could, when we look back on it as a human race 50, 100 years from now, be viewed as like maybe one of the worst things.
Yeah, worse than smoking.
Oh, yeah.
I genuinely think it will be viewed
well, we
at
can
worst.
not smoke.
Yeah.
Try not be doing social media, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think it's not even close, honestly. Like the detrimental effect it's had on mental health. I mean, you have kids, I have kids. I can't imagine growing up in this world.
Yeah, it's rough.
Of like Instagram and Snapchat and all this type of stuff. I mean, it was hard enough, like just hearing in the halls what somebody might say about someone else or about you, right?
Yeah.
But like now it's broadcast to the world.
Yeah,
and the
or
whole
screenshot.
School and that's crazy.
And shared on a text thread to all of my friends.
That's crazy.
Yeah, my sons always say, Dad, you would get roasted. Like if you had to grow up in my day and age, like anything that you just said to one of your friends, if somebody screenshot that and sent that out, you'd be smoked.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? Like, yeah.
I guarantee I would have. No question.
Yeah, when I was growing up, for sure. It was a disaster.
No question.
Yeah, it was a
disaster. I don't know how kids do it. I really like admire the kids who could get through it and they have this strong mental health, but we have such a huge mental health crisis in this country.
Yeah.
And it's just so obviously correlated to the invention of social media.
Yeah, and parents, right? I mean, we're not doing them any favors.
For sure.
Because like, hey, get off of Instagram, but I have Instagram open. Mm-hmm. And like, well, that's interesting. Dad, you're asking me to get off the very device you're feeding on right now. And so then it's like, well, I got to delete it all.
Yeah.
But it's like, gosh, I kind of want to see what's on Instagram right now.
And you kind of can't. Yeah, it's like this. You can, of course.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like smoking. Like you could just not smoke. And if you're a smoker, take the nicotine patches. Like there's ways to not smoke and things like that. There's no like nicotine patch for social media.
Yeah, it's tough.
Or something like that. Like
somebody needs to create one.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be. Well, thanks for everything you've done for the state of Utah, man. And you've been a part of building incredible companies, legacy companies that, by the way, you have companies that you're involved with that are going to outlive you already. And Torus, I think you've got something here that's going to, change the world. And I really think you have potentially the opportunity to be the biggest company to ever come out of this state, which is crazy, man. That's pretty beautiful. Yeah,
well, we're giving it our very best shot. I mean, huge kudos to honestly, the team, man.
Yeah.
If we got a good crew and the hearts and minds are in the right places, and we're gonna get everything we have.
That's awesome. Come back soon and let's get more.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, man. I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, brother.
All right, take care.